The rain hammered against my windows like an angry visitor demanding entry. I've weathered many Montana storms in my 15 years on this farm, but this one had teeth. Lightning ripping across the sky. Thunder that made my old farmhouse creak in protest. Just the kind of night to pour a whiskey, stoke the fire, and thank God for solid walls between me and nature's fury. Then came the knock. Not a pounding or a hammering, but something desperate. 3 rapid taps barely audible above the storm. I wasn't expecting anyone. Out here, 20 miles from the nearest town, visitors don't just drop by, especially not at 10 p.m. during the worst deluge we'd seen in a decade. I grabbed my shotgun, an old habit from living alone in the wilderness, and approached the door cautiously. Through the rain-streaked window, I could make out a hunched figure, drenched and shivering. When I opened the door, I found a young man, couldn't have been older than 25, standing there looking like he'd swum rather than walked to my porch. His dark hair plastered to his forehead, clothes soaked through, eyes wide with what looked like relief at seeing a human face. "Car broke down," he managed between chattering teeth. "About a mile back. Phone's dead. I saw your lights." I should have sensed something then. Maybe it was the way his eyes darted past me, scanning my living room in quick, practiced movements. Or maybe it was how his accent seemed to slip momentarily when he thanked me. But the rain was coming down sideways, and whatever my instincts whispered was drowned out by the storm. "Get him before you catch pneumonia," I told him, stepping aside. I lent him some dry clothes, too big, but better than his soaked ones, and put on coffee. He introduced himself as Mark, said he was heading to Billings for a job interview. He asked questions about my farm, nodding attentively at my answers while his eyes never quite settled on anything. They kept drifting to the windows, to the doors. "Storm might last till morning," I said. "Couch is yours if you need it." He accepted with a gratitude that seemed excessive for such a simple offer. Around midnight, I woke to floorboards creaking. Through my barely open bedroom door, I glimpsed Mark hunched by the window, whispering urgently into a phone I thought he'd said was dead. I couldn't make out the words, just the tension in his shoulders. I pretended to be asleep when he returned to the couch, but sleep didn't find me again that night. At dawn, the storm had exhausted itself, leaving behind that strange stillness that follows chaos. I headed out to check on my livestock, stepping onto my porch with a mug of coffee, and froze mid-step. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows and no markings were positioned at different points around my property. Men in tactical gear stood beside them, binoculars trained on my house. As I watched, one raised a radio to his mouth. Before I could process what I was seeing, I felt Mark's presence behind me. He'd appeared silently, his borrowed clothes exchanged for his own now dry ones. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't want to involve you in this." The nearest SUV's doors opened, and armed men began approaching my farmhouse with deliberate precision. I turned to Mark, questions bursting in my mind. Who was he? Were these men here to help him or hunt him? And most urgently, what had I unwittingly welcomed into my home? My hand instinctively reached for the shotgun I'd left by the door, but Mark gently placed his hand on my arm. "That won't help," he said, his voice suddenly different, firmer, more assured. The shy, grateful stranger from last night had vanished. "Who are you?" I hissed, watching the men advance across my muddy yard. They moved with military precision, spreading out to cover all angles of approach. "Someone who made a mistake," Mark replied, eyes never leaving the approaching men. "But not the mistake you think." The morning air felt electric with tension. My chickens had gone silent, as if they too sensed the wrongness unfolding. 6 men in total, tactical gear with no identifying insignia, weapons held at ready positions. "Are they going to kill us?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Mark glanced at me, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "No, they want me alive. You're just collateral." "Collateral in what?" The nearest man was 30 yards away now, moving deliberately through my vegetable garden, crushing the tomato plants I'd nurtured since spring. Instead of answering, Mark reached into his pocket and pressed something into my palm, a small metal object, warm from his body heat. "Keep this safe," he whispered. "If anything happens to me, there's a woman in Bozeman named Sarah Levitt. Find her." Before I could examine what he'd given me, the lead officer called out, "Marcus Devereaux, by authority of Special Directive 27, you are ordered to surrender immediately." "Marcus." "Not Mark." Another lie. The man who'd slept on my couch straightened his shoulders. "Colonel Jenkins," he called back. "Fancy meeting you in Montana." "You're surrounded, Marcus. It's over." Mark, or Marcus, chuckled softly. "It hasn't even begun." I slipped whatever he'd given me into my pocket, mind racing. What had I gotten myself into? 15 peaceful years on this farm, and now armed men were surrounding my home because of a stranger I'd sheltered from the rain. "Sir," the officer addressed me now, "step away from the subject. You're harboring a fugitive with classified intelligence. This is a matter of national security." Before I could continue watching this unfold, I need to make sure you're still with me. The YouTube algorithm has been dropping subscribers lately, so if you're enjoying this true account, make sure you're still subscribed and hit that like button to help others find this incredible story. Believe me, what happens next changed everything I thought I knew about our government. "I'm harboring nothing," I replied, finding my voice. This man showed up during the storm. I was being a decent human being. Marcus leaned closer to me, his words barely audible. "These are not legitimate military personnel. Whatever they tell you is a lie." The man called Jenkins was now just 15 yards away, his rifle pointed at the ground, but ready. "Last chance, Marcus. Come quietly or things get complicated." "For a program that doesn't exist," Marcus called back. "You boys sure make a lot of noise." Jenkins' face hardened. "Take him." Two men suddenly broke into a sprint toward us. I felt Marcus tense beside me, his body coiling like a spring. "I'm truly sorry about this," he whispered to me. Then he moved with a speed I wouldn't have believed possible, vaulting over the porch railing and rolling into the muddy yard. What happened next would forever change my understanding of what human beings are capable of. The first operative lunged for Marcus, but in a blur of movement, Marcus sidestepped and used the man's momentum against him, sending him face first into the mud. The second man fired what looked like a dart, not a bullet, that Marcus caught mid-air with a reflexive snap of his hand. "Stand down," Jenkins barked, but his men were already converging. I stood frozen on my porch, unable to process what I was seeing. Marcus moved like water between the armed men, never where their weapons pointed, always a half-second ahead of their movements. He wasn't fighting back. He was simply untouchable. "He's displaying!" one of the men shouted. "Code Indigo!" Jenkins pulled a device from his vest. "Suppressors on!" They all reached to their belts and twisted something. The change in Marcus was immediate. He stumbled, suddenly clumsy, his superhuman grace evaporating. One of the men tackled him from behind, driving him into the mud. "Get him secure," Jenkins ordered. Watching them pile onto Marcus, something inside me snapped. This was my property, my home. Without thinking, I fired my shotgun into the air. The boom echoed across the valley. "Enough!" I shouted. "This is private property. You have no warrants, no badges. Get off my land." Jenkins turned to me with cold eyes. "Sir, you are interfering with a classified operation. Put the weapon down, or we will consider you hostile." The small object Marcus had given me felt heavy in my pocket. Whatever it was, these men were willing to bring a military-style operation to seize it. My finger tightened on the trigger. The local sheriff is a good friend, I bluffed. He's already on his way with deputies. You want to explain to them who you are and why you're here? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Jenkins' face. Marcus, still pinned under two men, caught my eye. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. We don't have time for this, Jenkins decided. Secure the subject and move out. They zip-tied Marcus's hands and dragged him to his feet. His face was bloody from the struggle, but his eyes were clear, focused on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Check him for any devices, Jenkins ordered, gesturing at Marcus. I needed to keep what Marcus had given me safe. Before they could start searching, I made a show of lowering my shotgun. Before this situation unfolds any further, I should mention something important. The platform has been unsubscribing viewers without their knowledge lately. If you're invested in finding out what happens next, make sure you're still subscribed and hit that like button so YouTube knows to recommend the next part of this story to you. Trust me, what I discovered about Marcus and these men changed everything. As they patted Marcus down, I slipped the small object from my pocket and into the hollow of a porch support beam, a hiding spot I'd used for my emergency cache. He's clean, reported one of the men. Jenkins approached Marcus, standing nose to nose with him. Where is it? Marcus smiled through bloodied teeth. Not here. Search the farmer, Jenkins ordered, his voice tight with frustration. Two men approached me and I raised my hands. Go ahead, I've got nothing to hide. As their hands roughly patted me down, I watched 3 black SUVs pull onto my property, driving straight across my winter wheat field. The vehicles formed a tight perimeter, and I realized with dread that all evidence of this intrusion would soon vanish. He's clean too, the man searching me reported. Jenkins grabbed Marcus by his collar. What did you do with it? Marcus's eyes flickered to me for just a moment. Insurance policy. Jenkins struck him across the face. Load him up. We'll deal with this at the facility. As they dragged Marcus toward the nearest SUV, he called out to me. Remember what I said. She'll know what to do. The name Sarah Levitt echoed in my mind. Bozeman wasn't far. Jenkins approached me one final time. This never happened. You never saw us. You never met Marcus Devereaux. For your own safety, forget everything. As the SUVs pulled away, crushing more of my crops, I stood alone on my porch. The small metal object, hidden in my beam, might be nothing, or it might be worth sending armed men to my peaceful Montana farm. What I didn't know then was that within 24 hours, my barn would be burned to the ground, my phone lines cut, and strange cars would begin patrolling the road outside my property. But by then, I would already be gone, heading to Bozeman with nothing but a hidden flash drive and a name. The drive to Bozeman felt like crossing some invisible threshold. With each mile, my normal life receded in the rearview mirror. The flash drive burned in my pocket, a tiny thing to upend a man's existence. I'd left at 3 a.m., taking back roads in my old pickup. 2 black sedans had been parked at my property line since nightfall. They didn't follow, which worried me more than if they had. Bozeman was busy with morning commuters when I arrived. Finding Sarah Levitt would be challenging. No address, just a name in a city of 50,000. I parked downtown and tried the phone book at a diner. 3S Levitts listed. Refill? The waitress approached, coffee pot in hand. Please. I hesitated, then asked, You wouldn't happen to know a Sarah Levitt? The coffee pot stopped mid-pour. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Who's asking? A friend of Marcus, I replied carefully. She set the pot down and slid into the booth across from me. Is he alive? She whispered. My heart raced. Last I saw, Men in black SUVs took him yesterday. She closed her eyes briefly. You have something for me? I nodded, barely perceptible. Before I could continue, I should quickly mention that YouTube has been randomly unsubscribing viewers lately. If you want to see how this dangerous situation unfolds, make sure you're still subscribed and hit that like button to keep up with this story. Not here, Sarah said, rising. Meet me at the bookstore across street in 20 minutes. Back entrance. Outside, I noticed a black sedan parked down the block. Same model as those at my farm. Coincidence? Unlikely. At the bookstore's rear door, Sarah pulled me inside. Show me. I handed over the flash drive. She examined it, face grave. Marcus said you'd know what to do, I said. This contains evidence of what they've done to him. To all of them. She plugged it into a laptop. What they told you about national security was a lie. Project Indigo isn't protecting America. It's creating weapons from people. On screen, I saw Marcus in a lab, performing impossible feats of agility and strength. What is he? I whispered. Still human, she answered firmly. Just enhanced. I was a researcher there before I escaped. They're using genetic modification and neural implants. Those devices they used? Suppressors? She nodded. They broadcast frequencies that disrupt the neural pathways of the enhancements. A sound outside made us both freeze. Car doors slamming. They found us, Sarah whispered, yanking the flash drive out. There's more you need to know. The project goes deeper than you can imagine. The people behind it, the building's front door crashed open. Footsteps approached rapidly. Take this. She pressed a key into my palm. Storage Unit 247, Central Storage. Everything's there. Find Eliza Chen in Washington. She can help expose them. The back room door burst open. 2 men in suits, weapons drawn. Sarah Levitt, how predictable, said the taller one, voice eerily familiar. And you brought a friend. I recognized Jenkins as he stepped into the light, smiling coldly. The farmer who harbors fugitives, he said. You should have stayed on your farm. Sarah's hand tightened around mine, passing something else, small and metallic. A thumb drive. Run! She shouted suddenly, shoving a bookshelf over. I bolted through the emergency exit as gunfire erupted behind me. The alleyway stretched before me as I sprinted away from the bookstore, the sounds of chaos fading behind. Sarah's sacrifice burned in my mind as I clutched the thumb drive and key she'd pressed into my palm. I couldn't look back. Not now. For 3 days, I lived like a ghost, sleeping in my truck, paying cash everywhere, moving constantly. The storage unit key felt heavier with each passing hour. Finally, under cover of night, I slipped into central storage. Unit 247 revealed Sarah's meticulous work, files, hard drives, and a laptop containing everything about Project Indigo. The truth was more horrifying than I imagined. The program had begun with voluntary soldiers, but expanded to unwilling recruits with specific genetic markers. Marcus had been targeted because of his unique DNA profile. I found a burner phone and called the number for Eliza Chen. Who is this? Her voice was guarded. A friend of Sarah Levitt. She's gone. Silence then. Meet me tomorrow. National Mall, Lincoln Memorial, noon. Washington, D.C. was a 14-hour drive. I memorized the files, then destroyed them, keeping only the thumb drive. As I drove, radio reports mentioned a tragic fire at a Bozeman bookstore. 1 casualty, no name given. At the Lincoln Memorial, tourists milled about while I waited nervously. A woman in a blue coat approached and sat beside me. You have it? Eliza whispered. I passed her the drive. Everything Sarah had. Names, locations, test subjects. You understand what happens now? She asked. Once this goes public, they'll come for you. For all of us. They already took everything from me, I said. My farm is probably crawling with them. She nodded solemnly. We have safe houses. People who've been fighting this for years. And Marcus? If he's still alive, we'll find him. She stood. This evidence goes to multiple news outlets tonight. By morning, Project Indigo becomes public knowledge. She handed me a new phone. Keep this. When it rings, follow the instructions. 2 days later, I watched from a motel room as breaking news flooded every channel. Government hearings were announced. Several high-ranking officials resigned overnight. Project Indigo was exposed, along with the names of those behind it. The phone finally rang. "Time to move," said an unfamiliar voice. "There's a car outside." As I stepped out, I saw him, Marcus, leaning against a sedan, looking thin but alive. "They couldn't hold me once the suppressors were deactivated," he said, embracing me. "You did it. You actually did it." "Sarah did it," I corrected. "We just finished what she started." Sometimes the most ordinary lives take the most extraordinary turns. A simple farmer who opened his door to a rain-soaked stranger ended up changing the course of history. If my story has taught me anything, it's that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually finds the light. If you've made it to the end of this journey with me, I'm grateful for your company. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next, because this might be the end of one chapter. But some stories are just beginning. Thank you for listening to mine.